All right, got a little carried away. I was trying to show the maps and exploded the maps off the page. Couldn't find the page. I went the wrong direction. The Exodus route. Mediterranean Sea up here. Goshen, Ramses, Egypt over here. Now you got the Gulf of Suez. This is the branch of the Red Sea, but this is also the branch of the Red Sea. Goes up the Gulf of Aqaba, Gulf of Suez. Here's the wilderness of the Red Sea. This is also part of Egypt. The proper Egypt is over here. The wilderness is so influenced with all kinds of industrial and ownership and occupation of this. This is basically Egypt as well. So, from Sukkoth, traveling across the wilderness, mountainous range, see the mountainous range here, and then to Etham. Then it quickly went south towards Nuweiba Beach, a mountainous region on either side, and over to Heroth, crossing with chariot parts and wheels and bones, human remains, right here, in a shallower part of this Gulf of Aqaba branch of the Red Sea. And they crossed over, and there's Midian. Where did Moses come from? 40-some-odd years there. That's Arabia, and Mount Sinai is also there as well. And Paul's writings in Galatians 4:25 indicates that it's in Arabia, Mount Sinai. So let's move on down gently. Picture of Mount Sinai. Take a look at one of the other maps here. We're looking at a flat map. There's Lower Egypt, Gulf of Suez, Gulf of Aqaba, Mount Sinai, Midian. There's the wilderness, Sinai Peninsula. That was considered part of Egypt in those ancient days. There's the Red Sea, Gulf of Suez. And here's the view of the Wadi Watir Canyon Trail, kind of winding around. And here's the beach that it ends up on. Look at the mountainous ranges on either side. And the fortress, the Egyptian fortress, right there. 4.5 some odd miles. We have Nuweiba Beach, top view. There's the crossing path. There's a column that's on one side. There was a column on the other side, on the Arabian side, but the writings that Solomon put on it were stripped down, but you could still get a couple of Hebrew words here and there, but the Arabians on that side did not want to give credit to what happened at the Red Sea crossing right there. So, we're going to review the history. The Israelites evidently took the route of the winding Wadi Watir Canyon Trail to where it terminated at Nuweiba Beach at the Red Sea's Gulf of Aqaba. Old maps of this area designated as Nuwayba al Muzayyinah, or what are literally waters of Moses opening. Interesting, historically speaking. Scripture's account of the Exodus indicated that the Israelites were closed in by the wilderness, in other words, entrapped by extremely large geographical structures of the wilderness, mountains. So there were evidently geographical barriers such as mountains on two sides, with the Egyptians pursuing behind them and the Red Sea in front of them. The most feasible location for this would be a wide gorge, being steep mountains in the Sinai Wilderness, which leads out into the Nuweiba Beach Peninsula of the eastern branch of the Red Sea, today called the Gulf of Aqaba. 1 Kings 9:26. So the children of Israel were disconsolate. Exodus 14:11. Then they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt so with us to bring us out of Egypt, confirming their being hemmed in on all sides? But the Lord had a different plan, which included the destruction of Pharaoh's and Egypt's armies. Exodus 14, the whole chapter, and which began with the first Passover. Note that the evening of the 14th of the month, the evening of the first Passover, Exodus 12:6-27, was the evening when the children of Israel would rise up and go out from among my Pharaoh's people. And they would then journey to Ramses, to Succoth, in that first month. So those places are named. On the 15th day, the day after the Passover, and from there, by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, they would journey from Succoth and camp in Etham, which is on the edge of the wilderness. We saw that on the map. Whereupon they would journey into the wilderness of Etham, which is called Shur also, camp there, and then turn back going southward toward Pi Hahiroth, which faces Baal Zephon across the Red Sea. Take a look at the map there. Take a look at those names. The first map. There's Pi Hahiroth. There's Baal Zephon, Nuweiba Beach. There's Etham, across from Elath or Eloi. It's a wilderness. Gulf of Aqaba. So, note that the evening of the 14th of the first month, the evening of the first Passover, was the evening when the children of Israel would rise and go out from among my Pharaoh's people. There it is. They would journey from Ramses to Succoth in that first month. From there, away wilderness, Red Sea. We looked at that. They would journey from Succoth and camp at Etham, like I said, which is on the edge of the wilderness, whereupon they would journey into the wilderness of Etham or Shur, camp there, and then turn back toward Pi Hahiroth, which faces Bel Safon. We saw that across the Red Sea. And they would camp there before Migdol, that Egyptian fortress. From there they would pass through the midst of the Red Sea. After a number of encampments, including Shur and Etham, Marah, Elim, they would come to the wilderness of Sin on the 15th day in the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt. The accounting of the days is as follows. 15 days' time elapsed in the month of Nisan, 15 days second month, less 3 days in time in Shur, and less 1 day in each in Marah and Elim, a net total of 25 days from the time the children of Israel left Egypt to the time they camped before the Red Sea, before crossing the Hahiroth Beach area into the Red Sea, across the Red Sea into Arabia. Then in the third month after the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day, the 15th day of the month, they would come into the darkness of Sinai and camp in front of the mountain, Mount Sinai. So they crossed over, and then in front of Mount Sinai, on that day they would receive the 10 Commandments and the rest of the provisions of the law, only 2 months after they had departed from Egypt. So, Exodus 13, 1-22, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Consecrate to me all the firstborn, and whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both man and beast, it is mine. And Moses said to the people, Remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. On this day you are going out in the month of Abib, and it shall be, when the Lord brings you into the land of Canaanites. That's where just shortly up, going north, they would have been in Canaan. And the Hittites and the Amorites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and the 7th day shall be a feast in the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all your quarters. And this is done which you did for me when I came out from Egypt. And it shall be a sign for you on your hand, and as a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. So moving on down the sea. So concerning the route by which the Lord had Moses lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, Josephus wrote in Antiquities of the Jews, that land was difficult to be traveled over. We've seen that, not only by armies, but by single persons. Now Moses led the Hebrews this way, that in case the Egyptians should repent and be desirous to pursue after them, they might undergo the punishment of their wickedness and of the breadth of those promises they had made to them. As also he led them this way on account of the Philistines, who had quarreled with them and hated them of old, that by all means they might know of their departure, for their country is near to that of Egypt. And thence it was that Moses led them not along the road that tended to the land of the Philistines, but he was desirous that they should go through the desert, which they did, the wilderness. That so after a long journey and after many afflictions, they might enter the land of Canaan. Another reason of this was that God commanded him to bring the people to Mount Sinai, and there they might offer him sacrifices. And that was in Midian area. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, and the children went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So they took their journey from Succoth and camped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. So the children of Israel gathered at Succoth, a large staging area used by the Egyptian military in Egypt, on the eastern border of the Egypt proper, north of the branch of the Red Sea. That today is called the Gulf of Suez. We looked at that left-handed branch. Succoth was not located in the wilderness to the Red Sea, the Sinai Peninsula, as some contend, but inside of Egypt. For Exodus 13:18 and 20 and Numbers 33:6-8 stipulate that the children of Israel traveled from Succoth by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, out of the land of Egypt, not into it further, and camped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. And we saw those places. The word wilderness, the word rendered wilderness, Exodus 3:20, evidently refers to the wilderness of Shur, meaning wall. It is also referred to in Numbers 33:8 as the wilderness of Etham, meaning forts, referring to an Egyptian line or wall of forts that were built to defend Egyptian interests in the wilderness. So the wilderness of Shur, also called the wilderness of Etham, is a region in an area which today is called the Sinai Peninsula. This wilderness ranges from Etham in Egypt's northeastern frontier, extends eastward into the northwestern quarter of the Sinai Desert, and southward through the mountains, through which the children of Israel traveled on a caravan trail, turning southward off that trail and through a wide gorge between mountains, which led to where they crossed the Red Sea. The wilderness of Shur or Etham extends around both sides of the northern end of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba. Let's take a quick look at that. Okay, there's Etham. See the northern part of the wilderness over here, and of course there Elath. And then here they stopped and went quickly southward. Up there is Canaan. So they're going this way to where they cross to Elam, which is in Midian, Arabia, and there's Mount Sinai. It's all in a path that's most plausible. Now, getting back to where we got. So, toward Mount Sinai, Galatians 4:25, Paul said, Mount Sinai is in Arabia. They then went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days' journey in the wilderness of Etham, which we looked at. From there they arrived at Marah. So Succoth, from which God led the people by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt, was evidently large enough for a great number of people to assemble. Since Egypt is west of the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, there's plenty of room. The wilderness through what is now called the Sinai Peninsula, then anything in an eastward direction out of Succoth would best lead them out of Egypt proper, not north or south, as many people contend, and many Bible maps and people seem to still think that way. It's not practical, not plausible, although archaeological evidence indicates that the Egyptians did have copper and turquoise mining operations, such as the Serabat el-Kahidim on the western side and Timnah on the eastern side, temples and fortresses in the wilderness to the Red Sea, the Sinai Peninsula, at the time of Moses. So the Sinai wilderness was not part of Egypt proper. So the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea led directly eastward from Succoth, out of the land of Egypt, to Etham and the wilderness of Etham Shur, and then southeast to cross the eastern branch of the Red Sea, today called the Gulf of Aqaba, into Arabia and to Mount Sinai. So this contradicts those who contend that the children of Israel went north to the Nile Delta region near the border of Egypt, which encompassed a number of lakes and marshland, across one of which many Bible maps and many people maintained was where the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, or as they maintained, to the Sea of Reeds. But this pathway would have kept the children of Israel either in Egypt or too close to Egypt, hence too susceptible to being quickly overtaken